This is Maggie Rose, and this is the new Concord Hour being brought to you by the Micro Effect Radio Broadcasting Network. And today's date is May the 3rd, 2016. And we are coming to you live from Idaho and the Great Northwest. Folks, in about just a few days, we have Mother's Day coming up. And I'm hoping that those of you who have either mothers, wives, surrogate mothers, or significant others will remember to make at least a phone call, if not send a card, and let them know that you're thinking about them. I've had a lot of people telling me that they're really, really concerned about what's going on with the Bundys, and that the Bundys are not going to be able to be home with their wives on Mother's Day. The children are with their mothers, but not with their fathers. And the best thing to do, folks, is just turn around and say, call it what it is. It's the fact that our people are political prisoners. And what's happening right now with the Bundys is absolutely, in every way, upsetting, shocking to all of us, because of the fact we know for a fact that they should have been released on bail, and yet they're being treated worse than some of our murderers out there, okay, who are released after 2 or 3 years. Now, I was asked the other day if I could give an update on what was going on with Ammon Bundy, and all I'm able to tell you at this point in time right now is that Ammon Bundy and the others have been sent back to Portland, that they have been neglected, they have been starved, they have been physically abused by the jailers both in Henderson, Nevada, as well as in Portland. And from what I'm understanding is that there are many times when they've been transferred back and forth between both Portland and Nevada, that they have been put into solitary confinement. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. But again, I wanted to remind you all, and again, this is the Micro Effect Radio Broadcasting. I'm your host, Maggie Rose, coming to you with the new Concord Hour. Now, I received another email from someone the other day asking me how the Concord Hour came to be, or the new Concord Hour to be. Well, back in the 1990s, I was doing radio, and I named the show the Concord Hour after the Battle at Concord and Lexington. You all know in your history books about the battle that took place there when we were fighting the British. And in many ways, what we're doing, we're fighting something akin to the British today, but a much more powerful enemy, a more insidious enemy. So what I've done is I've decided to call this show the new Concord Hour, because it's different than it was in the 1990s. We have different things that are occurring, different occurrences taking place across not only the country, but now around the world. And we all know that the cabal, and we know that the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Illuminati, the Bilderbergs, and people like Bill Gates and Ted Turner, they have plans for us. And these plans do not include being part of their so-called private society. They believe that we are the useless eaters and feeders. They want to depopulate the world's population. They wanted to do it by the year 2020. That was according to Henry Kissinger, if you remember listening to what he said back in the 1980s. Well, now they've had to kind of move up the date to 2030 to 2050, but they are already upset because they're behind the time schedule that they had given themselves, and so they're trying to speed things up. And I understand today, when I went to one of the local hospitals that in the state of Oregon, as well as in California and Washington, but in the state of Oregon, they have a senator there by the name of Senator Merkley, and he's now trying to find another way to take away people's guns. So this, of course, is very disconcerting, because this is what they did in Germany. They took away people's guns, and then there were easy pickings in order to round them up and take them away to the inner cities, force them to leave their country homes, their country estates, their ranches, their farms, and move them into the inner cities, where then they started picking them off It was really easy to pick them off at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning when they were in little tiny cubicle apartments, pushed in close together like sardines. So that is one of the things that some of the people have been writing to me about, that they're really concerned that things seem to be speeding up, and people just have a sense that something's not quite right out there, and that they're not being listened to by the politicians. The politicians are too busy thinking and taking care of themselves, and I guess these politicians believe that when whatever does come down, that they're going to be allowed to be part of the elitist group. And what they don't seem to realize, they're going to be one of the first ones picked off by the elitists. The elitists will have felt that they have served their useful purpose. They don't need them anymore, and they will be rounded up just like everybody else. Now, again, we all know that Mother's Day is coming up this Sunday. Today is Tuesday, the 3rd of May. Did you all know that today is National Teacher Appreciation Day? Yes, Tuesday, May the 3rd is So if you have any teachers in your family or any teachers that you happen to recognize or acknowledge that they were there for you when you were going through high school or college, send them a card. I know I have a couple family members that are teachers in the family, and many years later, they're having students come back 10, 15, 20 years later, thanking them for what they did for them when they were their instructor. With that all said and done, folks, we're going to go back again to what is going on with the Bundys. I'm getting a lot of email about it, a lot of concerns coming and saying that they're hearing next to nothing about what's really happening. Nothing seems to be taking place, or as far as speeding up when it comes to trying to help the Bundys. But I received something from Gary Hunt. Gary Hunt, as you all know, has a blog, and the blog that he does happens to be dealing with what's happening in this country. Now, Gary Hunt has what they call the Operation Mutual Defense. You can find that at OMD, that's O like an Oscar, M like Mike, D like Delta or dog, at One American, that's all spelled out, one O-N-E, AmericanPatriot.com. And he has been doing numerous bloggings and articles regarding the Bundys, the Hammonds, and what's been going on there. Number 11, entitled The Bundy Affair, which is Violence Begets Nonviolence. The Bundy Affair, number 11, this just came out today, and it's Violence Begets Nonviolence. It's dated today, May the 3rd, 2016, and it's coming out of his Outpost of Freedom. And I'm going to go ahead and read some of this to you. It was on April 12, 2014, when mostly unarmed supporters gathered at the Toquap, Washington, about 80 miles northeast of Las Vegas, between exits 112 and 120 on Interstate Highway 15, and stood down the federal government with regard to cattle been impounded, ready for transport or killed. However, since the government has brought the matter up again, we may want to revisit some of the incidences and circumstances that led to the unrustling of cattle by these supporters of the original American way of life. It was April 6, 2014, about 1:30 in the afternoon, when Dave Bundy had stopped to take pictures of the 20 or so vehicles coming off a road from Gold Butte Mountain. It was rather odd to see so many vehicles in that location, so Dave Bundy decided to record the event. Other Bundy relatives were present and reported seeing 4 snipers, one of them about 30 feet away from Arden Bundy. The men in the vehicle convoy stopped, exited, donned their tactical gear, and told those present to, quote, disperse immediately, unquote. The other Bundys began to disperse or remained in the vehicles to watch what was transpiring. However, Dave continued taking pictures. Now understand that Dave and the others were on a public road simply wandering about and recording what was going on. As Dave continued, some armed men approached Dave, grabbing him and throwing him to the ground. Then they rubbed his face in the gravel as they handcuffed him. He was then picked and placed up into one of the vehicles, and they headed towards Henderson, Nevada. One of the government players, Lisa, L-I-S-A, Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N, the load/hold team, one of the Rustlers teams, number is 775-229-2722. Again, one of the government players, Lisa Wilson, who is the load and hold team, and one of the Rustlers teams at 775-229-2722. And you can see government agents at the Bundy Ranch begin to question and interrogate Dave, who refused to provide any meaningful answers as he had done nothing more than take pictures from a public road. Upon arrival, he was booked into the Henderson Detention Center, the same location that he and other Bundy defendants have found themselves visiting more recently, and spent the night. No arraignment, no charges, just, quote, gray bar, hotel, unquote, time. The following morning, April 7th, he was handcuffed and taken to a federal building where many other agents questioned him, though he never did see a judge or a magistrate. Finally, he was given 2 citations. 1, failure to disperse, unquote, and 2, quote, resisting arrest, unquote, right, and turned out into the streets of Las Vegas, where he had to fend for himself to get back to the Bundy Ranch. On Tuesday, April the 8th, Clancy Cox, C-O-X, and Arden, A-R-D-E-N, Bundy, were down by the Virgin River, which abuts the Bundy Ranch, when they observed helicopters herding their cattle, often hitting the livestock with the skids of the helicopter. This was extremely stressful to the livestock, especially to the calves that could not keep up with their mothers. On April the 9th, some of the Bundys and their supporters stood where a dirt road intersects Highway 170. A number of SUVs, trailers with heavy equipment, and dump trucks were leaving the Gold Butt area. They wanted to see what was being removed in the dump trucks, since it was from the area where the Bundy cattle had browsed for food. They stood in the road to slow down the convoy. Agents exited the vehicles, drew their tasers, and those with dogs restrained them while in attack mode. Government agents, and there's a video, threw one of the participants, Margaret Bundy Houston, Houston, to the ground. Ammon Bundy was tasered while trying to assist Margaret Bundy Houston. Well, that is just one side of the story of the government aggressive and illegal actions that led up to the subsequent release of the cattle. However, there's another side that is figuratively aggressive and literally illegal that must be considered. On July 9, 2013, Judge Lloyd D. George of the Nevada United States District Court granted a summary judgment against Cliven Bundy. In essence, it was an order to arrest those cattle that had strayed onto certain portions of government, quote, owned, unquote, land. However, the order only provided for the, quote, impounding, unquote, of the cattle, with no direction as to the disposal of those cattle that the government was able to arrest. This left an open door to the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, with regard to the disposition of the cattle, with no legal direction as to that end. Shane Sampson, S-A-M-P-S-O-N, and Cam, C-A-M-M Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R, were out of Utah, and they were contracted by the BLM to rustle, that means round up and steal cattle, the, quote, trespass cattle, unquote, on, quote, trespass lands, unquote. However, there have been laws in effect for over a century that were enacted to protect against cattle rustling. These laws apply in some cases within a state and in all cases when entering a state with cattle. They are, number 1, brand inspection, assuring that the livestock is yours or that you have a bill of sale for the livestock. And number 2, a livestock health certificate that assures that the livestock is not carrying communicable diseases. Here, for example, is the Nevada law branding, not health. Title 15, Crimes and Punishments. Chapter 205, Crimes Against Property, Larceny. 205-220, Grand Larceny Definition. Except as otherwise provided in NRS 205.226 and 205.228, a person commits grand larceny if the person, 1, intentionally steals, takes, and carries away or leads away or drives away A, personal goods or property with a value of $250 or more that is owned by another person. B, bedding, furniture, or other property with a value of $250 or more, which the person, as a lodger, is in use with his lodging and which is owned by the other person. Or C, real property with a value of $250 or more that the person has converted into personal property by severing it from the real property owned by another person. Number 2, uses a card or other device for automatically withdrawing or transferring money in a financial institution to obtain intentionally money which he knows he's not entitled. 3, intentionally steals, takes, and carries away, leads away, drives away, or entices away. A, one or more stock owned by another person, or B, one or more domesticated animals or domesticated birds with an aggregate value of $250 or more that is owned by another person. 4, with the intent to defraud, steal, appropriate, or prevent identification. A, marks or brands, B-R-A-N-D-S, causes to be marked or branded, alters or defaces a mark or brand, or causes to be altered or defaced a mark or brand upon one or more head of livestock owned by another person. B, sells or purchases the hide or carcass of one or more head of livestock owned by another person that has had a mark or brand cut out or obliterated. C, kills, again, kills one or more head of livestock owned by another person but running at large, whether or not the livestock is marked or branded. Or D, kills one or more domesticated animals or domesticated birds with an aggregate value of $250 or more, owned by another person but running at large, whether or not the animals or birds are marked or branded. The, quote, rustled cattle, unquote, were captured in Nevada to be transported over Nevada roads and were subject to numerous state and federal laws, though no effort was pursued to have Nevada relinquish their jurisdiction overriding the state laws. Sampson and Warner were going to take the cattle to Utah and sell them at auction. So let's look here at the destination state. So, folks, their names are Cheyenne, that's S-H-A-Y-N-E, Sampson, S-A-M-P-S-O-N. Again, Cheyenne, S-H-A-Y-N-E, Sampson, S-A-M-P-S-O-N, and Cam Warner, C-A-M-M, last name Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R. Again, Cam, C-A-M-M, Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R, out of Utah, were contracted by the BLM. So, folks, Sampson and Warner were actually rustling cattle and stealing them, and they were going to transport them over Nevada roads, even though there were numerous state and federal laws against this. Sampson and Warner were asked by the BLM to take these cattle to Utah and sell them at auction. So now let's look here at the destination state. Utah has requirements for the sale and movement of livestock. The brand inspection requirements for cattle, folks, are 1. All cattle that forage on open range must be branded with a Utah recorded brand. You should always carry your wallet-sized brand card with you. It is recommended that all cattle not grazing on open range also must be branded with a recorded brand to assist in the return of any stray cattle and to prevent theft. 2. Brand inspections are required by law. Get a brand inspection, even if the cattle are not branded, when they are 3. Changing ownership. 4. Going to slaughter. 5. Leaving the state. Yearly rodeo and show cattle inspections are provided at a cost of $15 per head. Also, when traveling within the state, always carry proof of ownership. The following items will be accepted as proof: a wallet-sized brand card matching the brand on the cattle, a brand inspection certificate showing where you purchased the animals or travel destination. A bill of sale does not serve as proof of ownership. An auction invoice. Also, registration papers in the name of the current owner on the registered cattle. Folks, that would be the Bundys, Clive and Bundy especially. When you're transporting the cattle that belong to someone else, like the Bundys, carry within permission from the owner, which would be the Bundys. All cattle should be rebranded with the new owner's brand within 30 days of purchase. Now, folks, let's go to the health requirements. To reduce the risk of spreading disease from other states, like from Nevada to Utah, to our livestock, the following laws pertain. In Utah, all livestock entering the state must have a valid health certificate issued by the certified veterinarian of the state of origin, which would be from Nevada, folks, from the Bundys, except when they are consigned on the brand inspection certificate directly to the approved auction or slaughterhouse, or traveling on a current animal entry permit or commuter permit. In addition to the health certificate, all horses must also have a negative Coggins, that's COGGINS, test within the last year. All cattle, all bison, all elk, all sheep, and all hogs must have a permit number issued by the Utah Department of Agriculture prior to entry into Utah, folks. All import requirements for animals entering Utah can be found in R, that's R like in Romeo, 58-1. Again, I'll repeat it. All import requirements for animals entering Utah can be found in R58-1. Admission and inspection of livestock, poultry, and other animals. Clearly, what the BLM intended to do, given the ambiguity of the judge's order, was to violate state laws. Folks, both Nevada and Utah. There are also federal health laws with regard to cattle, and there is no evidence that there was ever any intention of complying with either state or federal law. By the BLM, folks, by the federal government. Frankly, what they intended, and to the extent that they accomplished anything, is criminal. Criminal. Punishable behavior at best. And there could be little doubt that the killing of some of the cattle, whether intentional or not, is a violent and aggressive act. Now, a question arises as to whether there was any violence on the part of the Bundy supporters, whether militia or not. Well, the government says that they had guns. Oh, my goodness. And that's right. Some of them did. The Second Amendment, the Nevada Constitution, and statutes protect that right. Now, we can wonder why they have that right, or we can go to the Nevada Revised Statutes. Title 15, Crimes and Punishments, Chapter 200, Crimes Against the Person, 200.120, quote, justifiable homicide, unquote, defined, no duty to retreat under certain circumstances. Number 1, justifiable homicide is the killing of a human being in necessary self-defense. Let me repeat that. Number one, justifiable homicide is the killing of a human being in necessary self-defense or in defense of habitation, property, or person against one who manifestly intends or endeavors by violence or surprise to commit a felony, like rustling cattle, or against any person or persons who manifestly intend and endeavor in a violent, rigorous, tremulous, or substituous manner to enter the habitations of another for the purpose of assaulting or offering personal violence to any person dwelling or being therein. Folks, this is Maggie Rose. We're going to go to a station break. Hello, folks, and we're right back with you again. This is Maggie Rose, and this is the new Concord Hour being brought to you by the Microeffect Radio Broadcasting Network out of Idaho. And, folks, we're in the chat room right now. I want to give a big hello to number one Surf, to Bonnie, to James Kin, to Joe, to Mr. Virtue, to Not Dead Yet. Oh, Panzer. Hello, Panzer. And Tango Tess. And Valerie. It's good to see that you're all listening in right now, that you're all in the chat room right now. What we were doing is we were going over some things that came across my emails from Jerry. We were reading his most recent article he put out today. As you all know, Mother's Day is coming up on Sunday, and today, May the 3rd, is National Teachers Appreciation Day. And the article we were reading regarding the Bundy Affair, what had happened, violence begets nonviolence. And the phone number I saw in the chat room, somebody was asking again. The government players, Lisa Wilson, was part of the wrestler teams of the BLM. Lisa Wilson, Wilson. Phone number is 775-229-2722. 775-229-2722. Again, 775-229-2722. Now, what you don't know, folks, and what I don't see in his article so far yet, is the fact that I talked to Lisa Bundy, which is Ryan Bundy's, no, it was not Lisa that told me this, actually. It was Angie. Ryan Bundy's wife, Angie, told me that she personally was there when they took Dave Bundy, who all he was doing was taking pictures with his camera. And she told me he got severely beat up in front of her, in front of the grandchildren, the nephews and nieces, that when he had his face ground into the dirt by the BLM, by these thugs, that he was beat up really, really badly. And, of course, as we all know, as I read earlier in this article, he was taken into, the jail. He was booked. And when he was later on released, they tried to say that he had failure to disperse. Why should he disperse off of a public road when he's taking pictures with his camera? Now, unlike the BLM that come up and put guns in your face, I mean, I can tell you at the Sugar Pine Mine in Grants Pass, Oregon, there's been at least 2 or 3 miners that were in their mine, and they literally were climbing out of their hole or their pit and found a gun pointed in their face by the BLM. So the BLM and Wildlife Management, Department of Forestry even, they're all running around with guns, and they're pointing guns at us. Do you know what would happen if we did the same thing back? Well, we know what would happen. I mean, look at poor Lavoie. He's climbing around in 5 feet of snow, trying to draw the firing off of the vehicle away from the women and the other gentlemen in the car, and he gets shot in the back between 3 and 9 times. So, yeah, we know what they do. They're criminal. And it wasn't the Oregon State Police or the FBI that even shot Lavoie. It was mercenaries. It was contract killers. So Dave was lucky that I guess all he did was get beat to a pulp and have his face ground into the dirt. But then to say that he failed to disperse and resisting arrest, how do you resist arrest when you are being stepped on and trounced into the ground, and then you're tossed into a vehicle, and then after you're booked, you're thrown into the streets of Henderson or Las Vegas and told to find your way home? I don't understand that. Well, I, for one, I'd like to call Lisa Wilson at 775-229-2722 and see what she has to say about that. Let's go back to what we were reading here, okay? So we were reading that justifiable homicide is the killing of a human being being and necessary of self-defense or the defense of habitation, property, or person against one who manifestly intends or endeavors by violence or surprise to commit a felony like rustling cattle, or against any person or persons who manifestly intend and endeavor in a violent, righteous, tumultuous, or serendipitous manner to enter the habitation of another for the purpose of assaulting or offering personal violence to any person dwelling or being thereon. Well, folks, when they shot, Lavoie in the back, how do you say that's justifiable homicide? Gary, are you there with us? I guess Gary's on the line right now. Gary, are you with us right now? Let's see. And Gary's trying to get into the chat room here. I don't seem to be able to pull him up, but he's there. Anyway, folks, so as I was saying, number 2, a person is not required to retreat before using deadly force as provided in subsection 1 if the person, now folks, let me read that again. First, we read justifiable homicide as the killing of a human being in necessary self-defense or defense of habitation, property, or person. Well, obviously, they can't justify shooting Lavoie in the back, whether it was 1 time, 3 times, or 9 times. Number 2, a person is not required to retreat before using deadly force as provided in subsection 1. Now, folks, why should these people at the Bundy Ranch be required to retreat? They were on a public road, and or they were on their property. So why are some people that were carrying open carry and carrying arms legally now sitting in jail, have been rounded up based on something that happened 2 years ago? They've now been rounded up by the federal government saying, oh, you're carrying weapons on the Bundy Ranch. You are carrying weapons on the land that's surrounding the Bundy Ranch. You're carrying weapons on the open road. Oh, my goodness, you're on the bridge. And we want to say that you had a firearm pointed down directly upon us. Well, folks, they were running around beating up people like Dave Bundy. They've been pointing guns at us. They were tasering. They tased Margaret Bundy Houston, a woman who was a mother and a grandmother who had been surviving battling cancer. They beat her up. They assaulted her. When Ammon Bundy went to her defense, he also got assaulted by the federal government. So number 2, a person is not required to retreat before using deadly force as provided in subsection 1 if the person is A, not the original aggressor, B, has a right to be present at the location where deadly force is used, and C, is not actively engaged in conduct in furtherance of criminal activity at the time deadly force is used. So, folks, we go on with Gary's article. So on the day of the unrustling, which is April the 12th, there were armed people who were, quote, not the original aggressor, unquote, and who did, quote, have a right to be present, unquote, and were not, quote, engaged in conduct in furtherance of a criminal activity, unquote. So let me read this again. So on the day of the unrustling, April the 12th, there were armed people who were, quote, not the original aggressor, unquote, and who did, quote, have a right to be present, unquote, and were, quote, not engaged in conduct in furtherance of a criminal activity, unquote. However, the federal government claims that their obedience to the state law was criminal, resulting in some of the charges in the 63-page superseding indictment. They were there solely to assure that the government aggressors, based upon previously mentioned behavior, did not escalate the violence. They were there only for self-defense and the defense of others. Had that not been their purpose, as the government alleges, there surely would have been a gunfight at Toquap, Washington that day. Toquap Wash is the name of it. T-O-E, it's called Toquap Wash, W-A-S-H, that day. In fact, the Bundy side showed far more discipline and composure than the government agents did. Let me repeat that. In fact, the Bundy side showed far more discipline and composure than the government agents did. Well, the government alleges that those that were armed were violating the law. They assume that their acts were criminal, though those acts were very consistent, and obviously they're right in pursuance of state Nevada law. So this brings us to understand that the acts of violence perpetuated by the government on the days that led up to the unrustling were, well, only intended to discourage people from asserting their right to be on public roads, take pictures, and maybe even stop vehicles. Sounds like shades of Ferguson in Missouri. To determine if illegal activity had taken place by killing cattle and hauling the remains out in the dump truck. That would have been easily resolved if the public servants would have willingly cooperated and allowed observation of the content of the truck. Then there is the matter, folks. There is the matter of Dave Bundy, who did not disperse when told to. By what lawful authority, we have no indication. Then he was, quote, resisting arrest, unquote, though they do not provide any grounds for the arrest that they made, not to mention the abuse he was put through, and never even got before a judge. I go on to finish Gary Hunt's article. However, through it all, no act of violence was perpetuated by and of the Bundy supporters. The only violent acts were by the government agents and contractors who are pursuing illegal activities and using implied threats, pointed firearms against the Bundy supporters. This, under the state law of Nevada, would have allowed the agents to be shot to stop the crimes they were committing. Let me repeat this, folks. However, through it all, no act of violence was perpetuated by and of the Bundy supporters. The only violent acts were by the government agents and contractors who are pursuing illegal activities and using implied threats, pointed firearms against the Bundy supporters. This, under Nevada law, would have allowed the agents to be shot to stop the crimes they were committing. So Gary goes on to say, so with apologies to William Shakespeare, when dealing with the federal government, quote, violence begets nonviolence. This article can be found online at the Bundy Affair, number 11, Violence Begets Nonviolence. And this is written by Gary Hunt, Outpost of Freedom. And he concludes it with, the past is infinitely important. However, it pales in importance to the future. Well, folks, I am only trying to state that what happened with the Bundys was criminal at the very, very least. And what happened less than 2 years later was murder by the same federal government. The emails that we have going back and forth between Governor Kate Brown in Salem, Oregon's office and the White House, Mrs. Garrett, who happens to be Obama's right hand, the email stating we cannot allow the Bundys to pull up stakes at the Wildlife Refuge and go to the neighboring county, Grant County, where Sheriff Palmer is. We cannot let that poison spread. You know, folks, the poison about the Constitution. Did you know that the Constitution is considered poison by the cabal, by the New World Order, by the Bilderbergs, by the Illuminati, by the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, by the people like Obama, the Clintons? The Constitution is considered poison to them. Judges in their chambers laugh about the Constitution. I wonder if they even had a 2-hour class of the Constitution when they went through law school. I'm ashamed to say that the country that I served for so many years has portrayed not only the soldiers, but the American people. They have lied to us for decades. They led us to believe that we were fighting for something that was good and true. And yet what do? They secretly fly in people that have not been properly vetted, and they plant them in quiet little small communities throughout the great Midwest of the United States, knowing darn well that some of them are terrorists. We take someone like Berdahl, and we go ahead and we accept him when he walked away from his post, when he walked away from his job, and others went out looking for him, and some died because of the result of his taking off, and we trade him for 5 of the biggest notorious criminals that we had. The same ones that are going back now to help ISIS to come after us again. Some of them probably spearheaded what happened in France, in Belgium, in Bakersfield, California, and the other terrorist activities happening across this country. We turn around and we give 5 of them back, these known murderous criminals that believe in beheading. And then we take people like the Bundys and we throw them in jail. We tie them to a bench for 23 hours with no food, no meals. We keep putting them in solitary confinement. I don't know if many of you know much about the prison system, but one of these days we're going to have a show just about the prison system and what a great money-making system it is. How the prison systems across this country make money off of the prisoners. They charge them double what they should be charging them in the commissary. They have to call collect in order to talk to their loved ones and family members. Some of the prisoners are being told now that in places like next to the Portland airport that they're no longer going to be able to have even the 1 day a week to visit their family members. Their family members will have to drive from long distance just to come and see them on a computer, and then they have to schedule 1 or 2 days in advance. They make it almost impossible to have contact with the outside world. When the Bundy supporters or the Bundys were taken from Nevada back up to Portland, did you know that almost all of their personal notes, their records that they were supposed to keep with them for their defense, their own note-taking, their own notes that they or their lawyers or their representatives took while they were in Nevada, when they got back up to Portland, they all disappeared? Well, we already know how criminal the government is. This judge up in Portland, she's a joke. We already know the fact is that they took the camera and the phone that Shauna Cox had to leave in the car, in the truck, when she surrendered. She'd done nothing wrong. She was on her way to a meeting on the Committee of Safety. They laugh at the Constitution. They laugh at committees of safety. They laugh at what we're trying to do to bring this country back on track. What did they do? They took all the video that she took inside the truck while they were being shot at, and they put it up on YouTube. So they thought, well, now she can't sell it to make money for her defense, and she can't put it up there and use it in court because it's already been out there for the public to see, including all the potential jurors that would be listening to her case. Now, she and her defense can't show that video of how the government was trying to murder everybody in that truck. They wanted to make sure that there were no witnesses. The government is crooked. They don't follow the very rules they expect us to live by. I don't know how you all feel about that, folks, but it really tees me off. You know, folks, when you have somebody chained to a bench for 23 hours, when they are taken from Portland down to Nevada to so-called stand for the arraignment, and the female guard there in Nevada is abusing our men and takes them back to jail and tells the jailer, don't give them any dinner. These are just a bunch of, no good people. She used a little bit harsher words than those, but I can't say it here on radio. She told the jailer not to give him any dinner that night. So they went with at least 2, if not 3 meals that day. Folks, they were abusing. They were abusing our political prisoners. I wish we were able to bring Gary on because he could kind of explain some additional details of what is going on and what he's finding out in his research. But I'm very grateful to him and to the research he has been doing. I'm very grateful the fact that he has been able to dig up some of the information. I know that he's had me boots on the ground from time to time, gathering evidence and trying to give him contact names and phone numbers, using my abilities at research to be able to give him the information so he could write the wonderful articles. I mean, I love writing, folks, but he's a far better researcher and writer at this point in time. He has the time to do it. He's in his office from morning until evening, trying to make sure that he gets word out to the American people what's really going on. Because he knows you're not going to hear about this on CNN. You're not going to hear about this on MSNBC. You're certainly not going to hear about this on Fox News or even any of the other conservative stations like Newsmax or the new one called America One. This is information, folks, that you need to go to YouTube. But be very careful because there's a lot of fear mongers out there. When you guys prepare, in case there's an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane or anything else, you need to prepare very calmly and with forethought. We can't be running around like chickens with our heads off. They're coming to get us. They're coming to get us. No. We know what their plans are, and what we need to do is prepare. We need to pull together as groups of people in large cells, and we need to take a stand at every Memorial Day, every Veterans Day, every opportunity you have. Write letters to your editor. Bombard the Washington, D.C. with all the letters you can. Junk up their fax machines. Just start faxing and faxing and faxing.